I was actually asked to talk not only about the research that I'm doing, but also place it in context with regard to, what actually compelled me to do this research. I mean, as you heard, I already do technical research in material science. Photovoltaics, of course, are solar cells. And so we're trying to develop new materials for solar cells. Why isn't that enough? What compelled me to go further? Well, I guess, what it comes down to is I really enjoyed teaching, and it frustrated me when I was teaching an introductory to material science class for the entire college that it seemed like some students really weren't understanding what I was talking about. And I was like, well, it's obvious what the strengthening mechanisms in stainless steel are, and I don't understand why no one else understands it, right? And so, but that's not entirely true. I mean, there would be groups of students who really, really got it and really, really understood what it was that I was talking about. And then there were other groups of students that didn't, that for whatever reason didn't perform as well in the class. And I was trying to figure out why that was, because it seemed to me like these concepts were so fundamental to engineering practice that really every engineer should be able to understand some of these material science concepts at least on an intuitive level. And so that's what really kind of drove me to dig a little deeper, to try to understand why it was that some students were learning and understanding the material and others weren't. And so I was working with, CRLT. They are awesome. And when you guys presumably were preparing future faculty, wherever you guys end up as faculty members, find the equivalent organization, because they can be just so incredibly useful. And in fact, they were fundamental and instrumental, really, in getting me to do this research. So I went to them, and they came and they observed my class, and they said, "You're doing a great job." And I'm like, well, okay, but why is it that some students really aren't getting it? Why is this happening? And they recommended to me this technique called the Muddy's Point memo. Have you guys learned about this sort of thing? So what is that? You're nodding your head over there. Danny?
Yes.
Can you tell me what that is?
So I did a multi-point assessment in my lab. So basically, after the lab, the students write out the top 3 or 5 points that they don't understand during the class, and I collect them, or rehearse them, or get some questions, and explain them after.
Precisely right. So the idea is that after the activity, if it's a lecture or a laboratory or whatever, the idea is to ask the students to write down a couple of things that they did or didn't understand. So I'm like, that is a great idea. And then what that does is I can collect all these responses, and then I can turn around and address those topics. Terrific idea, right? And so I started doing that. Initially, I did it on index cards, old style. But eventually, I put it online, with the fancy C tools. You could take those quizzes. But here's the thing that I was finding. I was teaching a class of 200. And about a third of them wouldn't understand, say, dislocations. But 2/3 did. They understood it. So now I'm left with a quandary. Do I take the time and explain dislocations in a different way to the 1/3 of students who didn't really understand it, or not? Do I lose that 1/3? I mean, you guys, you're nodding your heads, right? I mean, because this is an issue, right? Because it'd be like, I explain dislocations and all of you people understand it, and these guys over here just totally don't get it. And so I'm not talking to you guys, I'm talking to these guys. And you guys become disenfranchised, and I lose you. That doesn't seem to me like a really good idea in a classroom, especially of 200, right? So what do? Well, what I was thinking about, I didn't have this idea on my own. I decided to put the answer in a screencast instead. Okay, so that way students could access it if they want to, and if they get it, like you guys all get it, so you don't need to look at the screencast, but these guys over here can. So that's how it started. that's how I decided to start doing research. And in fact, actually, it didn't start as research at all. It just started as, I'm just trying to get my students to learn better. And the research came later. So what is a screencast? You guys know. I mean, when I started doing this, not everyone understood what a screencast is. But it's essentially just a video that goes on, and it captures whatever is going on the screen, voice and something else, the visual piece. And there's a lot of different ways in which you can use screencasts. You can screencast several different things. You can actually screencast the lecture itself. That's certainly something you can do. You can screencast supplemental lectures, like for dislocations, additional resources for students who didn't understand it the first time, can go back and look at it again. And the other thing, and really one of the reasons I started doing this, was for homework and exam solutions. That's where I got the idea. I saw that there was a professor, I don't even remember where, but rather than printing out PDF solutions of her homework, she would put it in a screencast form. And what I thought was so great about that is you can't Xerox that and put it in a file somewhere. So that was my motivation initially. And so this is just a screenshot of a typical kind of screencast. This one is for homework, and you can see, well, I'll talk about it a little bit more in a second. So it's becoming more and more common now for us to be able to record the lecture. So there's my email. So here we go. I'm not going to put the sound on because you don't need to listen to me talk. You can hear it a little bit here. Oh, you can't, because it's here. Okay, so this is just a direct capture of what goes on in class. So we have up on North Campus, we have this terrific system. We have cameras in a lot of the rooms now, and so here is a camera. You can see me here. This is what I'm showing up on screen, and you'll also notice that I'm using a tablet PC, and I'm just writing directly on this. And there are thumbnails down here that students can scroll around, and they can actually look and see what happened in class. Okay, so I do this all the time. All my classes now are recorded, and I really think that's a useful thing. Lots of students say, I'm going to turn this off because it's distracting me.
So what happens,
So lots of students say that they really appreciate being able to go back. Okay, now you have a question. I can hear it in your head. Okay, so here's the question. Marie, what's the question?
How do you know students will show up to class?
That's the question. You know what I should do? I should just write it down on a piece of paper and then, That is the first thing that people always say. And you know what? If you're not good, they're not going to come regardless. So really, this isn't going to make a big difference, truly and sincerely. And in fact, people have done studies, and they show that the attendance doesn't go down any more than it would normally. I mean, let's face it. If you guys have taught, you know how this goes, right? In the beginning, your class is full. And after a couple of weeks, it gets less and less and less. And then it's full when exams come around, right? I mean, that's just the way it goes. And so recording it isn't actually going to make it worse. But what I have found is that students really appreciate the ability to go back, and review. Or, this class for 200, I have a lot of seniors taking this class. Guess what seniors do? They go off on job interviews. And so they can't always come. So you're going to lose those people anyway. At least now there's something to go back to. And then when people do miss for whatever reason, they can just go to the tape. Okay, so this I think is a really great resource. And it's an easy thing to do. And don't let the old fogies say, but then people won't come to class. Well, whatever. Make them want to come. That's your job, right? That's your job, is to make them want to come. All right, so the next thing, of course, so that's lecture capture. The next thing is, I should just stay there, is you can do supplemental work. And everyone here knows about Khan Academy, right? And so I'm not going to show you Khan Academy. You guys could go back and look at it. Who here has not heard of Khan Academy? Really? Seriously? Oh, gosh. Khan Academy, I started doing screencasting first. He stole it from me. No, I'm actually surprised because Khan is he's like a really big deal. So not Khan from Star Trek, different Khan. So what this is, so maybe I will show you. So what this is, these are videos that he's developed on various topics, and there's like a ton of them. So let's see here. So here you go. I'm just seriously just picking something at random. This is Khan. You can barely hear him. And so he's just going over these problems. These are supplemental work. And it could be on science, it could be on math, it could be on any number of arts, economics, and so forth. He has an entire database of courses. And actually high schools are using these things now. And the target grades are anything from middle school all the way through college, really. They're a terrific resource. Some people like them a lot. Other people have, think that they could be done better. But they're really a great resource. And if you guys are going out in the world to teach, I really recommend that you go take a look at it. It's kind of like the Wikipedia of screencasting, but as long as you go and look at it first to see if it's actually what you want, then you'll be fine. Question?
In your teaching, do you use this as a way to build foundational skills that students lack, or to provide additional practice for concepts that you're actively teaching?
So I don't use Khan Academy in my classes because I make them myself. I make them myself, and I'll explain how that goes in a minute. Well, I may as well just explain now, since we're here and you asked the question. So I don't use Khan Academy for this because the classes that I teach tend to be a little bit more specialized than what he'll put up there. What he has up there is really like very introductory stuff. So the college stuff is all pretty introductory. Take a look. It's worthwhile. If you don't remember how to do a particular kind of integral, he's got it up there. If you don't remember, I don't know, something about art history, he's got it up there. I mean, so it's really worth taking a look at. So the way that I do it is rather than using him, I make my own. Remember those index cards that I started with, asking students about what they don't understand? Well, I look at those, and then based upon the responses, I say, okay, so, a third of the class didn't understand dislocations. Okay, so I'm going to make a video like this about dislocations. Okay, and so I'm not going to rehash what I did in lecture because I already have that tape. So what I'm doing instead is I want to come up with other resources, maybe a three-dimensional model to show what this dislocation actually looks like, maybe do a problem that involves the dislocation and so forth. Something different, something extra that would help students who didn't understand the concept the first time. So that's what I generally do. But I can imagine that using Khan Academy, if you're teaching like a computer science course on programming, that would be great. So, and then, I use these from year to year. I taught the class several times, and so I developed this library of screencasts that other students could use. So even if they didn't ask the question, sometimes, you know how it goes. As I teach it more, and I found out that last year I had a third of the class who didn't understand the dislocations, I do the screencast already, right? And so my teaching improves. And so I find they don't need the screencast as much, but still, it's there, it's available for them. I answered the question, yeah? Okay. Okay, and so the last piece, the last way in which I like to use screencasts, oh heck, where did it go? There it is. Is homework solutions. And so this is a screencast that I made actually for a class that I taught this past semester. Let me just put it up here. Khalid was in my class, so you can ask him. I don't even know if he used, did you even go? You didn't. Okay, because he was so good that he didn't need it. So basically what this is, here's the homework on your right, and over here I'm using Mathematica to solve the problem. And you'll notice that this whole thing is only about 2 minutes long, right? I could play it for you, but I'm not going to. Basically what I'm saying is, okay, we had a lot of issues with this, so I wanted to go over it. And I just talk through the problem, and I talk through the solution. It's as if I'm sitting next to you and going over it right next to you, right there, as if I was sitting right there. Only I'm not. Now, in this particular case, I'm only going over one problem, 2 minutes, but there are instances in lots of classes where I'm going over stuff that has a lot more problems. So let's go back. So here's just a screenshot of another kind of homework exam, a homework solution, and you'll notice in this case, this is much longer. This is 13 minutes, and I've got all of these little index tabs so that students can navigate this a lot more easily. 2 minutes, it's not worth doing, but if it's much longer than that, you want to be able to give the students the opportunity to navigate through it so that they can see what's going on. And again, I'm doing the same kind of thing. Here's the problem, here's the solution that is worked out, here's a little snippet of code that the students could use in order to solve the problem, and I have all of these things that are in there. So these are the screencasts. Yes?
How long did it take to make that 2 minute
Yeah, I should write these down and be like, woo, holding up the sign as to what the questions are. Yeah, so the screencasts themselves, I have a theory about screencasting. So there's a number of different ways that you can go. You can do just-in-time screencasting, where it's just like really down and dirty and you're not very high production value, or you can go Hollywood and do really high production value. So it's your preference how you want to do that, but understand the higher the quality, the more time you're going to spend on it, and who's got the time. That's what I think. So my production quality is pretty low. I don't do a lot of these transitions and music and fade-ins and fade-outs because honestly, it's piece of paper, little pointer, and I do this. Okay, and so basically, how long does it take me? So say that I have to prepare the work, so you have to do that anyway. So I don't even count that as taking time because you'd have to write out the solutions if you were doing a screencast or not. But then it just takes me as long as it takes to talk it. And you'll notice I stutter a little bit and I do the ums and and whatever, and the whatevers. I don't edit those out, and I don't write a script. I just speak extemporaneously off the top of my head, and I just got over the fact that I talk the way I do. Other people need to write out scripts. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways. But basically, as long as it takes me to speak it, it'll take me another 50% of that time in order to get it in a form presentable and then upload it. And I can talk about the details of that later if you want. But the answer is it takes as much time as you allow it to take, but at a minimum, how quickly does it take you to speak through the material that you want to speak through, and then add 50%. So it really doesn't have to take a lot of time. Great, I love the questions, keep them coming. All right, so this is what I did. Okay, this is what I did. And this does take time, and I wasn't even sure that students were using it, because how often do students come up to you and be like, oh, Professor Millunchick, that screencast you put up is awesome? They never do that. Never, ever, ever do that. So if you're expecting them, yeah, they don't do that. And so, I was just kind of putting them out there into the ether, and I had no idea whether or not it was working. And it just so happened that Tertia, hi Tertia. Tertia came to my class, and she did a midterm evaluation. You guys, she talked about this. You guys know what this is? Again, incredible. And it's because of that midterm evaluation, I actually asked her to ask specifically, do you use these? Do you like them? And The answer came back as a resounding yes. I mean, I was about ready to give up on it because I was just like, well, I can't really see that there's anything happening. The students aren't saying anything, and I just don't know. But then she said, no, the students really, really love it. We should look into this a little bit more to see if this makes a difference. So really, it was Tertia's idea. So we decided to dig into it a little bit deeper. And so for the next couple of semesters, because I was teaching the same class from semester to semester, we started to look at this more closely to try to figure out if the screencasting actually made a difference. Okay, and so really what we wanted to do is we're like, okay, we're putting them out there. Are students using them? That's the first question. Do the students like them? That's the second question. Does it make a difference? And that's really the question, right? And so that's how it started. So I told you before that I'm teaching this class of over 200. I have more data than this, but this is just, it kind of shows you what the distributions are. It doesn't really change very much. We are engineering, so 23% women on average. We are primarily Caucasian in there. This surprised me actually, because I never really bothered to look at this. We really do have a distribution of sophomores, juniors, and seniors in the class. No freshmen, they don't have time to take this class. And then we also have a very large distribution of departments that take this class. Lots of people take this as a technical elective. And you'll notice that the three biggest majors that take us are, this stands for aerospace engineering, this is chemical engineering, and this is industrial and operational engineering. Okay, so those are the biggest groups of students that take the classes. Okay, and so we wanted to understand what was going on. So here are some more research questions. I already talked about some of these, and then the motivations for students using or not using the screencast was also important. So I mentioned that I'm an engineer, and so coming to this from an engineering perspective was just a mind blower, I have to say, because we started talking about things like theoretical frameworks. And I'm like, what precisely is a theoretical framework? Can we write down equations for this? Is that how that works? I don't know. But it turns out that there's actually, and I make fun a little bit, but there's a lot of really cool stuff in there that I have learned that I had no idea about before. I kind of knew maybe in an intuitive way, but not really in any kind of rigorous way. And so I learned about these different kinds of theories here. The first one is self-efficacy. You guys have been talking about self-efficacy. Do you know what it is? Well, you can read because I have it up there. But have you heard of it before? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah? Okay. But for the most part, you guys, the rest of you haven't. Okay, so really self-efficacy is just the idea of, can you do it? Can you do this kind of thing? Because if you don't feel like you can do it, then why are you going to do it, right? So you have to feel like you are capable of doing the task before you. And then there's also this other idea here about expectancy value theory, which was pioneered by Jacqueline Eccles, who's here at the University of Michigan. And basically what this says is it has this balance between the expectation of success, and motivation, and also value. Is the thing that you're doing important to you? Okay? And all of these things together kind of come together and say a great deal about a student's willingness to put forth the effort in the class. Okay, and so we actually looked at this after we gathered all the data. In the future, we should have probably done that first, but we're learning along the way. And so we looked at a number of different things. We looked at student perceptions, we did evaluations, and then we also looked at what really happened. And so this kind of thing is like a learning analytics approach. Have you heard of learning analytics, if I use that word? Yeah? No? Yeah? Okay. So basically what we're doing is we're just looking at data. We're looking at their at various things like their academic background, GPAs, demographics, and then comparing that to student performance, which the proxy we're using is, grades, because that's what we have. And we can get into a big argument about whether or not that's an appropriate way to determine student performance, but not now. Okay, And so for the most part, what we see is that, students actually found, that these lectures were helpful. Lots of them didn't look at it, okay? But, of those that did look at it, they thought that it was pretty helpful. Okay, and then here's some really great quotes, which I like showing because, they make me feel good. Screencasts both showed solutions and problem strategies. The verbal explanation makes it more understandable than a simple homework solution handout. And I think this is really true, right? I think this is really true. You can annotate the homework with just exquisite detail and still not capture everything that you can verbally, at least in my case. Okay, and so here, this person said that they like to listen to it even if they got the problem right, because just listening to the way the problem was reasoned out in words helped me to remember processes and procedures better. Huge, right? That's what we want our students to be doing. And so, we also did a bunch of work to try to determine how they used the screencast. They tended to watch the whole thing, which surprised me because I certainly wouldn't want to watch the whole thing, but they did. So that's nice. And then we can also correlate it to performance. So basically what we have here is the number of students who use the screencast. So this is the number of students who are actually looking at the screencast as a function of letter grade. And what you see, lots of people are getting A's and B's, but you also see that these blocks are really big, okay? So these are really tall. The students who got A's and B's are the ones who tended to use it the most. And we can block it out by major. And then we can also look at it by usage. Very high usage, not very good usage at all. And you'll notice that the very high usage data is by the industrial engineers over here, followed by the aerospace engineers. The chemical engineers didn't use it a whole lot in comparison to the other two. We looked at different levels, other things like gender, citizenship, race, ethnic group, and then also academic level. What I mean by academic level is like sophomore, junior, senior. We found no significance here. Okay, so I was actually expecting to see differences in gender and ethnic profile. And even citizenship, we were using that as a proxy for native language speakers, which it's a proxy. It's not the best thing ever. But we found no correlations for those things. The only thing that we did find correlation for was in the major. Okay? So chemical engineers of the three big groups, chemical engineers tended to use it the least. They still got great grades though. Aerospace were kind of in the middle. They got average grades. And IOEs, industrial engineers, used it the most, and they got about average grades as well. But see, here's the thing. Prior to using the screencasts, the IOEs did the worst. It was common knowledge in our department that if any industrial engineers taking this class, that they are going to do below average. And it's just like, the professors, we have biases too. And I apologize in advance. Any IOEs in here, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. No one. Where was there one? No? Okay. The common knowledge was in our department that the IOEs just weren't as smart as the rest of the college. I know. People would say that. Isn't that awful? But that was the reputation that they had in our department. So I wanted to understand why that was. We started using the screencast and now they're getting average grades. We looked at their GPA and everything else. Everything else was the same. Okay, so their GPAs were just as good. Their incoming ACT scores just as good. We looked at the distribution of men and women to see, well, maybe there's some kind of effect there. No, nothing like that. There was no significant reason for the IOEs not doing as well as everyone else until we looked at the curriculum. This is materials and science and engineering curriculum. These are the classes that we take, and I hope you can see this. I have them bolded, and then I looked at the curriculum for chemical engineering, aerospace, and industrial and operations engineering. And the bolded ones are those classes that are similar to the classes, in materials science and engineering. Okay, so concepts that are common, these are also going to be taught in these classes here. So you'll notice chemical engineering, almost all of those classes touch on material science too. A lot of those concepts are across these two majors. Aerospace also, not as much, but also lots of concepts in aerospace that also appear in material science, but in industrial and operations engineering, none. These people have never heard of a dislocation before. They don't know diffusion. They don't know a lot of these really basic concepts that the chemical engineers have been living with from the beginning, okay? So really what this told us was that the reason why these students weren't performing as well in the class compared to the others was because they had never seen the material before. But if you provide them with resources that will help them get up to speed, they will use them. And they will get up to speed, and they will do well. And that, to me, is the most exciting thing that you could possibly come up with. So this was a really profound thing that came out of this research that kind of opened my eyes. And now whenever someone says, those IOEs, I'd be like, and I would explain to my colleagues what is really going on. They don't always believe me, but I have tenure, so I don't care. I'm talking really long. How much time do I have left?
So I think we have about 10 minutes left.
Really? I was planning on talking for 15 minutes. So I could talk about lots of other things here, like why students do and don't do various things, but I'm not going to. You can come and talk to me about it later. There were a couple of other questions that, I was asked to answer 3 questions. How did you come to the research? I explained that. How was your teaching informed? And even though I didn't say it explicitly, I think it's kind of evident how it was informed. I kind of went away from, oh, what am I doing, to, where are the students coming from? And that's a really important thing. And then the last one is, how has this research enhanced your own technical research or interactions with colleagues? And I think you know about the colleague part. So with that, I just want to go ahead and open it up to questions. I thank you for asking questions during the time, but let's go ahead and ask some more questions.
Yeah, we have a question over here.
Oh, I just had a question. As a fellow engineer, I was just wondering, how do you, this looks like a course that would work well with having like a PowerPoint and slides and then going through problems.
Yeah.
But if you have one where you want to lecture more and derive equations, have you found screencasting to be useful for that as well? Because I'm just imagining deriving solutions to equations and not translating well with like a slide based.
Well, that's a great question. And in fact, I think that in that instance, if you want to derive equations in class, if that's something that you want to be doing in class, then remember, if you're lecturing and you're recording the lecture, the nice thing about recording a lecture in that case is you can say to the students, I don't want you to take dictation. Don't take notes. Watch what I'm doing. Make sure that you understand what I'm doing step to step to step, because you can always go back and pick up the notes from the tape, right? Tape. Who uses tape anymore? Gosh, I'm so old. But do you see what I'm saying? So you can actually use this to your advantage in a different kind of way. Alternatively, what you can do is you can do a screencast of the derivation that they can watch ahead of time, and then spend the class either talking about the derivation or applying that. So this all of a sudden, and my whole big thing right now is, I still do the screencasting, not nearly as much as I used to. I flipped the class, and this really, using this as just another resource to be able to get more active learning into the class and removing some of that really passive stuff, this could be a really great tool for that. There was a question right there.
I was just wondering if, for the students who don't use the screencasts, if there have been any surveys or if you've looked into,
We have.
like what would make them want to use the screencast?
Yeah, okay, so that's a great question, and that is a part of the paper that I had to skip. So we found that, you saw that there was a lot of people weren't using the screencast. Those were the chemical engineers. You know, they felt that they already understood the material and they didn't need to go back and use a screencast. And that's okay. I mean, because the screencast, if everyone is using the screencast, then that means you're not doing the lecture right. I mean, really, in the usage that I was using it here. You know, so either they felt they didn't need it or they had other resources that they wanted. There was a small group of students who forgot or ran out of time. Interestingly enough, those students didn't do as well in the class. Okay, so those students who had time management or like forgetfulness didn't do as well in the class in general. It wasn't super significant, so I don't want to overstate it too much. But I mean, again, it kind of goes into interesting ideas with what's going on with students. Other questions? How about this side of the room? Yes, ma'am.
How long did it take you to become proficient in using the software?
Proficient. How long did it take me to become proficient? I don't know. I'm not sure I am. You know, the thing is you have to, again, you have to kind of pick. You have to pick what is your goal. If your goal is to get the information out there, screencasting is dead simple now. I mean, back when I was doing this, it wasn't that straightforward. But now it is dead simple. You guys with Macs, you know, you just go, it's like built into the OS, you know? It's dead easy. Now, if you want to be fancy and edit and transition, you know, it's like, so what does proficiency mean? I mean, good enough? You guys could do it now, I promise you. Otherwise, it could take a lot of time. Yes, ma'am.
Might be a little bit like that, but it's just technical. How, when you're actually writing out like homework assignments, like the one that you showed, do you do that on like a tablet with like writing, or do you actually do it on like a piece of paper?
So I use a tablet because I'm a total tech nerd. You know, I have 3 computers with me today. You know, only 2 are here. There's one in my bag. But I mean, I really like to use technology, so I use a tablet. But you certainly do not need to use a tablet. You can write it out on a piece of paper, take a photograph of it with your phone, and then you can just speak to it on your computer, right? I mean, it's really quite simple. But I like using a tablet because with the tablet, what that allows me to do is it allows me to bring in images from other places. It allows me to open up other programs so that, like you saw, I was doing Mathematica. You know, I could show a movie in there, a little snippet in there if I wanted to. So I like using the tablet for that reason, but it's certainly not required. One of my colleagues makes fun of me and tells me that it's like a $2,000 whiteboard that I have. And it's kind of true, but I'm a nerd and I just like using it, so. Yes, ma'am.
You can track how many times the videos have been viewed or watched the whole way through or seen by different users?
Yes. Okay, so one of the things that I didn't mention is all of these videos are put up on CTools. So if you put it up on a course management website of some type, because those are authenticated, you actually have to be authenticated, authorized to use the resource. We can actually track who logs in and clicks each of the links and when. Now, how much they actually watch it, at the time, we didn't have that ability to do that. But since then, we've been talking to the CTools people, and now you can. Okay? And so the stuff is all there. I mean, if it's all done on computer, then you know you log in to use it. The information is there somewhere. It's just a question of getting it out. You know, and so when I was interested in getting this research, getting all this data, I just made a request, and they provided it for me. Yeah.
So I think this sounds great, regardless of the answer to this question. It's always great to have more resources for students.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if you actually had research or new research that shows that improves students' performance as opposed to it's just like, I would imagine the kids who get A's and B's are also the kids who would get A's and B's and try to seek out resources anyways.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was just wondering if there is research on that. I still think it's great.
Well, so actually, what we did find is that it brought up everybody. Okay, so even, yeah, the A's and B's students are typically because that's the first thing people say. Well, you know, you're just teaching to the top. Anyway, because those people are always going to use the resources. And so that's not true in this case. Even if you're not so good a student, you will still, your performance will improve. It is correlated. Usage is directly correlated. Okay. Now, the other thing is, though, is that does it actually improve performance? I mean, the IOEs historically didn't do well in this class, and we were able to get their average scores up. Okay, and so that to me is a pretty big indication that it works. And those students, the IOE students are just as good as the rest of the students. It's just they had never seen the material before. So giving them that extra little bump really helps.
So I remember you said that you do not give out PDF solutions that people can just photocopy it. But how does that affect people who are visual learners in the sense? For me, I need to look at something pretty much. I'm somebody who takes a picture of everything I look at in my brain. So this is, even if it's a final solution, even if it's that one step, just looking at it, do you know whether it affects us people?
We haven't actually looked at, asked the question about whether or not people are visual or audio or whatever learners. But we've thought about it, and we've thought about what this means. And the screencast, that has the audio component to it, but it is still highly visual. And so you don't have to listen to anything that I say, right? You can mute me, and you can just look and take screenshots. I mean, you notice that some of the things that I put up were just screenshots. So you can certainly do that. So I think that what's cool about this is that I think it does tap a lot of different learning styles, just sort of inherently, much more so than a piece of paper would. Because, piece of paper is media. This is multimedia. Sort of. You don't like it, huh? Okay, fine. We can argue later. Whatever, we can argue. You can argue whether or not there is such a thing as a visual and audio learner, too. I mean, there are some people that don't believe that anymore. But
Personally, the part that I love the most was like you can scroll into the part of the video which you care about and just look at the live messages.
I was expecting students to do that, just to go to the pieces they need. But apparently they don't do that. They report that they just watch it from beginning to end. And in talking to some of the people, what I think they do is that they're working, they're studying, they're doing whatever, and they put me on in the background, like TV or something, which I think is really weird. But I mean, maybe that's just the way people learn now, is they're used to having all this stuff around them all the time. I mean, that's certainly not how I learned. I can't possibly do that. But maybe that's a new learning mode.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, right there.
So the material you covered seems like it would translate really well to this medium, and I'm having trouble thinking of subjects that wouldn't translate as well, but I have to imagine there are some. So I'm wondering if any of your conversations with other faculty who you've helped think about this have raised any questions about the types of materials or teaching styles that don't translate as well with this tool.
Yeah, so this kind of stuff is terrific for engineering because of the kinds of things that we teach. So have you guys talked about Bloom's taxonomy at all? There are different levels of learning. So screencasting, this kind of screencasting, in my opinion, is the best when you're using it at the lower rungs. So the first thing about learning, the first step of learning is you have to remember. Okay, that's the first. You have to remember a concept, and then you have to understand the concept, and then you need to apply the concept. Okay, so those three things, this is great for. Applying, are you kidding me? Pfft, this is dead easy for procedural kind of learning. So that's great for that. It's great for providing like input ahead of time. So oftentimes in lecture, that's their first touch with the concept. If you can move the first touch, now you can move the first touch. It doesn't have to be a screencast. It can be an assigned reading. But do they do that? I don't know. Actually, Clid, in the class that Clid was in with me, I wasn't using screencasts so much. I was using a different kind of software where students were required to do a reading and comment on the reading. And that was up on a website. Okay? So the whole thing is this is great for the first touch, or for going over procedural learning. Now the higher learning, that should be going on in the classroom, quite frankly. So I'm not saying that screencasting is perfect for every situation. I'm not saying that at all. There are things it's great for. There are things it's not great for. Higher learning it's not great for. And that's the way it should be, because we should be doing that in person. That's a great way to end it.
So